My finger lay across the trigger guard of the M4 resting on my lap. My buddy, Quinn, snored loudly on the bench next to me. We were both supposed to be awake while on the observation post, but he had just come back from a 6-hour patrol. There were 2 other Marines with us, asleep on the wooden floor of our little hut on the top of a hill. 2 Marines on and awake while the other 2 would rest. That was the rule. I pulled the night vision monocular over my left eye. I stood up and stepped over my sleeping buddies. I had to stoop down under the tarp that covered the observation post. The warm breeze felt good with my helmet and flak jacket on. I pulled out a shitty cigarette from the pack I bought from the Afghan police. It was terrible, but any tobacco helped to keep us awake. I walked along the razor wire that bordered the safe area. Anything outside our razor wire on the hill was potentially an IED, improvised explosive device. Everything through the NVG was shades of green and black. It really messed with depth perception. Without warning, I found myself having tumbled waist deep into the unearthed grave I'd been trying to avoid. Fuck, I swore loudly. Suddenly, over my radio I heard, "Hey, outpost, you might want to watch your fucking step, boot. And put out that smoke, Sawyer, you're giving away your position." I crawled out of the grave, pulling myself to my feet. I looked up at the wooden tower by our post. It was equipped with a thermal video camera that was operated by our sergeants at the nearby patrol base. "Roger that," I replied. I gave a quick middle finger to the thermal camera. I smirked and dusted my trousers and flak off and then walked back to the outpost. Quince was awake now. "Sawyer, what was that all about?" he asked. "Fell into the stupid grave. We really ought to fill that in," I bitched. "And we really ought to get rid of that skull. It freaks me out, man." We both stared at the small skull that sat in front of us. It was dug up while we were making the post we now sat in. We kept it on a post with us out of some morbid sense of humor. Okay, it's messed up. We don't have the best rep when it comes to public relations, what with puppy tossing and pissing on dead Taliban. Quince shifted on the bench. "I hate the way it feels like it's watching us," he whispered. "Why don't we put it back?" "That's not a bad idea," I replied, staring into the dark hollows of its eyes. I felt a chill run down my spine. "Or I could get rid of it the expressway." "What do you—" Quinn started, but before he could finish, I grabbed the skull with my fingers in the eye sockets as if I were holding a bowling ball. I tossed it down the hill where it rolled past the razor wire until it hit a rock and shattered with a grotesque crack. I chuckled. Quinn stood up quickly, yelling, "What the fuck is wrong with you?" Johnson and Robinson started to wake. "You didn't seem to mind it being used for decoration these last few weeks, and now you're getting all prissy," I shot back. "Get the fuck over it." Johnson got between us and Robinson held me back. I hadn't realized how short my temper had been getting. "God, I'm sorry, this fucking post has been getting to me, man," I apologized. It wasn't like me to lose my temper like this. A few nights ago, I was told that I awoke from a dead sleep with a panicked and pale expression, whispering, "Stop, can't you hear it? It's out there." I fell back to sleep. I didn't remember this at all. Just forget it," Johnson calmly replied. "It's been a long night for all of us. You and Quince get some sleep. We've got the rest of the post." He was always the most reasonable of us. "Thanks," I mumbled. I took off my flak and helmet. I pulled my pack over and grabbed my sleeping bag. I didn't even bother to undress. The last thing I remember before I fell asleep was Johnson complaining about his NVG having a blind spot. "What the fuck was that?" screamed one of the Marines. Startled from my sleep, I grabbed my rifle and tried urgently to step out of my sleeping bag. My eyes were still trying to adjust to the dark, however, and I fell over almost instantly. I wasn't quite awake and had presumably only slept an hour at most. What is it?" I yelled back, aiming my rifle down the hill, looking for crouching Taliban in the night who surely were climbing the hill towards us. Something was right there, Johnson shouted. I was looking at the corner with the post, and there was a black figure. I took off the goggles and flashed it with the flashlight of my rifle, and it was still there. His voice paused for a second before he nervously continued. It was looking at you. Something about his face told me he wasn't kidding. I wasn't right in the head already, and this wasn't helping. Without putting on my gear, I ran outside the post, rifle at the ready. Somebody had to be out here with us. I switched on the light on my rifle. I didn't care if every damn sniper in the whole country knew I was atop this hill now. I wanted the son of a bitch who stared at me dead. The scary part was, in thinking about it now, I didn't care who it was. Marine, child, or Taliban, I just wanted them dead for disturbing my sleep. I hadn't rested properly in days, and the stress was clearly starting to get to me. Unable to spot anything, I walked back into the post and put my rifle down angrily, nearly forgetting to flip the safety back on. It was only then that I realized something was wrong with Robinson. He was staring intently down at where the shattered remains of the human skull lay. He seemed entranced. I could see he was smiling and humming to himself. Robinson was one of the most stoic guys I knew. He didn't smile, and he definitely didn't hum. Then he did something that turned my blood cold. He giggled and turned to me. In the dark, his eyes almost looked jet black, hollow. His grin was ear to ear now, and before I could do anything, his K-bar knife flashed in the night as he slashed it forwards, pinning my hand to the wooden bench. My eyes went red with pain. I couldn't hear anything beyond my own screaming. I had never experienced pain like this before. Johnson rolled around to see us and seemed frozen in terror. After a brief moment that seemed like years to me, he raised his weapon at Robinson. I don't know if he would have pulled the trigger. I never found out, because in that moment, the devilish Robinson, with his mad giggling, fired several shots into his chest. As Johnson collapsed, Twins tried to run in panic but was gunned down. Rounds impacted the back of his head and torso and he dropped like a rag doll. I didn't know if the adrenaline had begun to kick in, but I began to feel a bit more clear. Over the radio, Outpost, this is COC. What the fuck is going on up there? Were those gunshots? Outpost, report. I frantically grabbed for the radio, but Robinson calmly picked it up and transmitted in an eerie voice. Where Marines and Angels fear to tread, there you'll find us, all dead. He tossed the radio down the hill. It bounced and fell over by the fractured skull. I could hear chatter over the radio, though I couldn't make out what it was saying. Oops, silly me. Allow me, he laughed. He swiftly pulled a large knife from my hand, and I fell over in agony, holding my injured limb with my free hand. I rolled over and reached for my rifle, having to crawl over my shot comrades' bodies. Before I could make it, Robinson brought the knife down in the back of my right calf. Dear God, I thought the hand was painful. I was blind with pain now. When my vision cleared, he was standing over me. I couldn't make out his features. The moonlight was at his back, leaving me with his silhouette. He laughed madly now. You should get some rest. You have a busy night ahead of you. He dropped a small shovel we used to dig the post right in front of me. For now, I must retrieve our beloved radio. Our audience must be curious about what comes next, he continued as he walked towards the razor wire. At least there are no commercials. Ooh, what fun we could have with this wire, couldn't we? He roared in a menacing laughter now. He rolled through the wire, paying no attention to how it tore at his skin and uniform. Once he was free, he crawled on all fours to the radio. This whole event had been more than I could take. I was sure I would pass out from the pain and horror, but before I did, I witnessed him transmit one last message on the radio. Hurry. The real show is about to begin. He abruptly stomped on the skull fragments. The sudden explosion was deafening as it ripped into the night, the sheer concussion from the blast. I can't describe. How was I still awake? I should have passed out from the blood loss, the concussion from the blast, the psychological horror, still no rest. When the dust settled in the corner of the post, I saw a dark figure. I could sense it, smiling, giggling, and it got closer. It grabbed into my eye sockets with dark fingers, and then I finally had some rest.
COC, this is Blue 3. We have arrived at the outpost. I don't know how to describe what's happened. We arrived to find Corporal Sawyer. He took off Lance Corporal Quince's head with a shovel. He was decorating the outpost with his intestine. Oh God. I don't even. And the IED blast seems to have been triggered by Robinson running down the hill. Probably trying to get away from this fucking shit. When we came up the hill and saw what Sawyer was doing, he jumped at us. We had to gun him down. Fuck this shit, man. Fuck this. Johnson is alive. He was shot several times in the chest, but the flak jacket cut all the rounds. Doc Heles is looking him over now. He's awake, but absolutely delirious. Serious trauma. He's laughing like crazy.